She refused the human's advice, so now she's paying the painful price. Commander Derek Frost didn't sign up for babysitting duty, yet here he was, piloting a Class 4 interstellar transport across the Vega sector with the most insufferable passenger he'd ever encountered. The military had promised him action, adventure, and purpose after the Rigelian conflict. Instead, they'd assigned him to escort a spoiled alien diplomat's daughter to the remote desert world of Araxis. "How much longer?" Kira Talani asked for the 5th time in an hour, her orange-tinted skin practically glowing with impatience under the ship's lights. Her silver hair cascaded down her shoulders as she leaned over his pilot's chair, invading his personal space with a scent like exotic flowers and spice. "Still 6 hours," Derek replied through gritted teeth, his muscular frame tense beneath his form-fitting gray combat suit. "Just like when you asked 5 minutes ago." Kira huffed, her full lips forming a perfect pout. "This transport is archaic. My father's personal shuttle could make this journey in half the time." "Then you should have taken Daddy's shuttle," Derek muttered, focusing on the navigation console. "What was that?" Her amber eyes narrowed dangerously. "Nothing, Lady Talani." He straightened his posture, military training kicking in despite his irritation. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable in the passenger quarters? I've heard the entertainment system is adequate." Kira laughed, a sound like wind chimes that somehow managed to be both beautiful and condescending. "I've exhausted your pathetic collection of human media. Your species has such primitive tastes." Derek bit his tongue. 3 more days of this assignment, then back to real military work. He could endure. He had survived the vacuum of space for 90 seconds during the Battle of Proxima Centauri. He could survive one entitled Alien Princess. An alarm blared suddenly, red lights flashing across the cockpit. Derek's training kicked in instantly, his hands flying across the controls. "What's happening?" Kira demanded, her arrogance replaced by genuine concern. "Engine malfunction," Derek replied, his voice calm despite the chaos. "We're losing power to the main thrusters. We need to make an emergency landing." "On that?" Kira pointed to the view screen showing the approaching planet, Araxis, their destination, but they were approaching too fast and at the wrong angle. "Better than the alternative." Derek engaged the emergency protocols, the ship shuddering violently as it entered the atmosphere. "Strap in, now." For once, Kira didn't argue. She slid into the co-pilot's seat, securing the harness as Derek fought to control their descent. The ship groaned in protest, external temperature readings climbing dangerously. "We're coming in hot," Derek announced, his strong hand steady on the controls. "Brace for impact." The transport skidded across the desert surface, kicking up massive clouds of reddish dust. Metal screamed against stone as the ship finally came to rest, tilted at an awkward angle against a massive rock formation. Derek ran a quick systems check. Life support intact, hull integrity at 68%, and communications damaged but repairable. He unbuckled his harness and stood, his imposing height filling the cockpit. Could have been worse. Kira unstrapped herself, smoothing down her light gray top and adjusting her tight-fitting shorts. "So we're stranded." "Temporarily," Derek corrected, grabbing an emergency kit from beneath the console. "We're actually not far from the capital city, maybe 2 days' journey on foot. I can repair the emergency beacon, but it might take time for rescue to arrive." He pulled out 2 environmental suits, tossing one to Kira. "Put this on. Araxis might look like a standard desert, but it's home to some of the most dangerous flora in the sector. Those cacti have spines that can pierce standard body armor." Kira caught the suit but immediately wrinkled her nose. "This is hideous, and it smells like human sweat." "It's clean," Derek assured her, already pulling his own suit over his combat gear. "And it will keep you alive. The Araxis needle cactus is notorious. Its spines contain a neurotoxin that can paralyze within minutes." Kira tossed the suit aside with a dismissive flick of her wrist. "I'm not wearing that thing. My skin is sensitive to synthetic fabrics. Besides, we're just going outside to assess the damage, right?" Derek sighed, running a hand through his light brown hair. "Your funeral, princess. Don't say I didn't warn you." "I'll just be a minute," Kira announced, sauntering toward the ship's exit hatch. "I want to feel real sunlight on my skin after days in this metal box. Derek watched her with growing exasperation. The tight-fitting shorts she wore accentuated her curves in ways that were difficult to ignore, but her stubbornness was quickly overshadowing any attraction he might have felt. "Last chance," he warned, holding up the protective suit. "Those cacti aren't just decorative. They're evolutionary killing machines." Kira rolled her eyes. "My species evolved on a world far harsher than this dust ball. We're naturally resilient to most toxins." "Your funeral," Derek muttered, securing his own helmet. The hatch opened with a hiss, releasing a blast of hot, dry air. Kira stepped out confidently, her silver hair gleaming in the harsh sunlight of Araxis's twin stars. Derek followed closely behind, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings through his helmet's protective visor. The ship had carved a deep furrow in the red sand, ending in a small clearing surrounded by clusters of tall, blue-tinged cacti. Their spines glinted menacingly in the sunlight, some nearly 30 centimeters long and as sharp as surgical needles. "See?" Kira gestured around. "Perfectly safe. You humans are so... Ah!" Her scream pierced the desert silence as she backed directly into a cluster of needle cacti. The spines penetrated her clothing with ease, embedding themselves in the soft flesh of her thighs and buttocks. "Don't move!" Derek commanded, rushing to her side. "Every movement drives them deeper." Tears welled in Kira's amber eyes as she froze in place. "It burns! Get them out!" Derek carefully guided her away from the cacti, supporting her weight as her legs began to tremble. "I warned you," he said, his voice a mixture of concern and frustration. "Let's get you back inside." Once in the ship, he laid her face down on the medical cot. "I need to remove those spines immediately. The neurotoxin spreads quickly." "Just do it," she hissed through clenched teeth. Derek retrieved the medical kit and cut away the fabric around the embedded spines. He tried to maintain clinical detachment as he exposed the orange-tinted skin of her lower body, now marred by dozens of blue spines. "This will hurt," he warned, applying a topical anesthetic spray. "It already hurts. You..." Her insult dissolved into a gasp as he extracted the first spine with medical tweezers. "Stay still," he instructed, his voice gentler now. "The more you move, the more the toxin spreads." For the next 20 minutes, Derek worked methodically, removing spine after spine. Kira's complaints gradually subsided, replaced by occasional whimpers that stirred something protective in him despite his irritation. "Almost done," he assured her, noticing with growing concern that her skin was developing a bluish tinge around each puncture site. Her breathing had become shallow and her body trembled beneath his hands. "I feel strange," she murmured, her voice slurring. "Cold, but hot." Derek quickly scanned her with the medical tricorder. "Damn it. The toxin's spreading faster than I expected." He administered a broad-spectrum antitoxin, knowing it might not be specific enough for Araxis cacti venom. "Stay with me, Kira," he urged, turning her onto her back. Her eyes were unfocused, pupils dilated. "Talk to me. Tell me about your homeworld." "So bright here," she whispered, reaching up to touch his face. Her fingers traced his jawline with unexpected tenderness. "You're not terrible for a human." Despite the situation, Derek felt a smile tug at his lips. High praise from Her Highness. "Not a princess," she mumbled. "Just a important father." Her hand fell away as her eyes fluttered closed. The medical scanner showed her vital signs weakening. "No, no, no," Derek muttered, administering another dose of antitoxin. "Don't you dare die on my watch." He activated the ship's emergency medical protocols, which recommended immediate treatment with a specific antivenin, available only at settlements or medical facilities. Derek made a quick decision. He couldn't wait for rescue. The nearest settlement was a day's journey on foot, but there was a trading post marked on his maps just a few hours away. He carefully lifted Kira's now unconscious form, surprised at how light she felt in his arms. Her silver hair spilled over his armored forearm, and her head rested against his chest. Even in this state, there was something undeniably alluring about her. "You just had to be stubborn," he said softly, securing her in the co-pilot seat. He programmed the ship to broadcast a distress signal, then packed essential supplies and the portable medical kit. As he prepared to leave, Kira stirred slightly. Her eyes opened halfway, glassy with fever. Derek? She murmured, using his first name for the first time. I'm here, he replied, checking her pulse. It was rapid but steady. Don't leave me, she whispered, her hand weakly grasping his. Something shifted in Derek's chest, a protective instinct he hadn't felt since losing his squad in the Regelian conflict. I'm not leaving you, he promised, but I need to get help. The antivenin is our only option now. She nodded faintly, her fingers intertwining with his. You're warm, she observed, a strange note in her voice. Humans run hot. And you're burning up with fever, he replied, concerned by the flush spreading across her orange skin. Always found humans fascinating, she continued, her words drifting. So resilient, so passionate. Derek gently disengaged his hand, attributing her unusual candor to the toxin's effect. Save your strength. I'll be back with help before you know it. As he prepared to depart, he couldn't help but notice how vulnerable she looked, so different from the haughty diplomat's daughter who had boarded his ship. Perhaps there was more to Kira Talani than he'd initially thought. Kira floated in a sea of blue light, her consciousness adrift between reality and hallucination. The neurotoxin coursing through her system had transformed her perception, breaking down the carefully constructed walls of her mind. Father? She called out, seeing the stern face of Ambassador Talani materialize before her. I've failed you again. The apparition shook its head disapprovingly. Always disappointing, never measuring up to your brothers. What use is a daughter who cannot even follow simple instructions? Tears streamed down Kira's face as the hallucination shifted. Now she stood before the Talani Council, their judgmental gazes boring into her. Unworthy of your bloodline, and they chanted in unison, forever trying to prove yourself. No, she whispered, her dream self sinking to her knees. I am worthy. I am strong. The council chamber dissolved, replaced by the interior of Derek's ship. But this version of the ship was bathed in a warm, golden light. And there was Derek, standing before her without his armor, his human form radiating a strength that called to something primal within her. You don't have to prove anything to me, Dream Derek said, his voice deeper, more resonant than in reality. I see you, Kira, not the ambassador's daughter, just you. The hallucination Derek approached her, and Kira felt her body respond with an intensity that shocked her. In her culture, attraction was a clinical thing. Partnerships arranged for genetic optimization and political advantage. What she felt now was raw, untamed, a hunger she'd never experienced. Humans, she murmured as Dream Derek's hand caressed her face. So primitive in your passions, so free. Is that what you want? He asked. Freedom? I don't know what I want, she admitted, a truth she'd never voiced aloud in waking life. The scene shifted again. Now she was running across the desert, Derek beside her, both of them laughing as they escaped some unseen pursuer. The joy she felt was intoxicating. This isn't real, she told herself, even as her dream self reached for Derek's hand. Does it matter? Dream Derek replied. Sometimes the unreal shows us what we truly desire. Kira's fever dreams cycled through scenarios, some terrifying, others tender. Through them all, Derek remained a constant presence, protecting her, challenging her, seeing her in ways no one in her life ever had. In one particularly vivid hallucination, she stood before her father, Derek at her side. I choose him, she declared boldly, not the mate you've selected. Him? Her father's face contorted with rage. A human? You would disgrace our lineage for a primitive species? They are not primitive, she countered. They feel everything we've taught ourselves to suppress. They embrace life instead of analyzing it. They're magnificent. The hallucination shattered, and Kira found herself back on the medical cot, alone in the ship. Her body burned with fever, but something else burned within her, too. A realization that had been building since she first met the frustrating, captivating human commander. Derek, she whispered to the empty ship, come back. Meanwhile, Derek pushed himself across the harsh desert terrain, the portable medical scanner strapped to his wrist, beeping with Kira's increasingly erratic vital signs. The trading post was still an hour away, and the Antivanin with it. "Hang on," he muttered as if she could hear him. "Just hang on." His comm unit crackled with a message from the ship's AI. "Warning. Patient exhibiting elevated hormonal activity consistent with Talani reproductive cycle. Possible toxin interaction." Derek frowned. He knew the basics of Talani physiology from his military briefings. Their reproductive biology was typically dormant until activated by specific biochemical triggers. Could the cactus venom have triggered something? He increased his pace, ignoring the burning in his lungs, as Araxis's thin atmosphere taxed his endurance. The twin suns beat down mercilessly, but the thought of Kira alone in suffering drove him forward. When he finally reached the trading post, little more than a collection of prefabricated structures huddled against a rock formation, he wasted no time in locating the medical supplier. "Araxis cactus antivenin," he demanded, slapping his military ID on the counter. "Emergency situation." The trader, a grizzled human with skin leathered by years under the desert suns, raised an eyebrow. "Military, huh? What's the Terran Alliance doing in this backwater?" "Private transport mission," Derek replied curtly. "The Antivanin, now." The trader shrugged and retrieved a small vial of iridescent liquid. "This'll neutralize the neurotoxin, but any secondary effects are on their own timeline." "Secondary effects?" "Depends on the species," the trader explained. "In some, there's a hormonal response, especially in females of compatible humanoid species." He gave Derek a knowing look. "Talani, by any chance?" Derek's expression must have confirmed it, because the trader chuckled. "Thought so. You might want this too." He slid a second vial across the counter. "Hormone stabilizer. Unless you want to deal with a Tilani in full reproductive heat. They're quite intense." Derek hesitated, then took both vials. "How much, For the Alliance? No charge. Just remember Outpost 37 next time your superiors are distributing supply contracts." With a nod of thanks, Derek sprinted back toward the ship, the precious Antivanin secure in his pack. The medical scanner showed Kira's condition stabilizing, but her hormonal readings were spiking in patterns he'd never seen. As he approached the ship, a new sense of urgency filled him, not just to administer the antivenin, but to see her again. The realization caught him off guard. When had the annoying diplomat's daughter become someone he genuinely cared about? Derek burst into the ship, antivenin clutched tightly in his hand. The sight that greeted him made his breath catch. Kira writhing on the medical cot, her silver hair plastered to her forehead with sweat. Her orange skin flushed with an almost luminescent quality. "Derek," she gasped, her eyes flying open. "You came back." "Of course I did," he replied, quickly preparing the antivenin injection. "I said I would." Her hand caught his wrist with surprising strength. "You were in my dreams." Derek felt heat rise to his face but maintained his professional demeanor. "The toxin causes hallucinations. Hold still. This will help." He administered the antivenin, watching with relief as the medical scanner showed the neurotoxin levels beginning to drop almost immediately. Kira's breathing steadied and the pained expression on her face eased. "Better?" he asked, brushing damp silver strands from her forehead. "The pain is receding," she confirmed, but then shifted uncomfortably. But I feel, strange, hot, like my skin is too tight." Derek hesitated, then produced the second vial. "The trader said this might happen. The toxin can trigger hormonal responses in Talani physiology. This will stabilize you." Kira's eyes widened with recognition. "Is that a hormone suppressant?" "Yes, it should counteract the—" "No!" She pushed his hand away firmly. "I cannot take that." Derek frowned. "Kira, you're experiencing a biochemical reaction to the toxin. This will help." "You don't understand," she said, sitting up despite her weakness. "In Talani culture, the reproductive cycle is sacred. To artificially suppress it would be sacrilegious. Our body's natural rhythms are considered the voice of our ancestors." "Even when triggered by alien cactus venom?" Derek asked skeptically. A small smile played at her lips. "The cause doesn't matter. Once begun, the cycle must complete naturally." Derek ran a hand through his hair, exasperated. "And what exactly does this cycle entail?" Kira's amber eyes met his, a new boldness in them. Increased body temperature, heightened sensory awareness, intense desire. She said the last word with a deliberate emphasis that made Derek's collar suddenly feel too tight. "I see," he said, trying to maintain his composure. "And how long does this cycle last?" "Typically 3 to 5 days, though in this case, She glanced at the medical scanner. The toxin may have intensified things. Before Derek could respond, the ship's alarm system blared to life. "Warning, Class 3 dust storm approaching. Estimated arrival 15 minutes, duration unknown." Derek moved to the cockpit, checking the environmental sensors. The readouts confirmed his fears. A massive wall of swirling red dust was bearing down on their position, powerful enough to scour the paint from the ship's hull. "Perfect timing," he muttered, returning to the medical bay. "We're about to be hit by a major dust storm. We need to secure everything and power down non-essential systems to conserve energy." Kira attempted to stand but swayed dangerously. Derek caught her by the shoulders, steadying her. The contact sent a visible shiver through her body. "Sorry," she whispered, not meeting his eyes. "The heightened sensitivity?" Derek nodded, maintaining a respectful distance while still supporting her. "Can you walk? We should move to the crew quarters. They're better insulated against temperature fluctuations." Together, they made their way to the small living area. Derek helped Kira settle onto one of the narrow bunks, then busied himself securing loose items and checking the ship's integrity. "How long will we be trapped?" Kira asked, watching him work. "These storms can last anywhere from hours to days," Derek replied, sealing the last compartment. "We have enough supplies, but we'll need to be careful with power consumption." The ship shuddered as the first winds hit, sand hissing against the hull like thousands of tiny snakes. Derek dimmed the lights to conserve energy, leaving them in a soft, intimate glow. "So," he said, sitting on the bunk opposite hers, "looks like we're stuck here together. Just the two of us." Kira's eyes gleamed in the low light. "Just as I was entering a reproductive cycle. Quite the coincidence." "Terrible timing," Derek agreed, though his tone suggested otherwise. "In Talani culture," Kira said, drawing her knees up to her chest, "we believe that the universe arranges such coincidences for a reason." Derek raised an eyebrow. "And what reason might that be?" "Perhaps to teach me humility," she suggested with a rueful smile. "I should have listened to you about the protective suit." "Yes, you should have," Derek agreed, but without malice, "though I'm starting to think your stubbornness might be one of your more endearing qualities." Kira laughed, a genuine sound without her usual haughtiness. "Humans, always finding virtue in flaws." "It's what we do best," Derek replied with a grin, "finding the good in the bad, making the best of difficult situations." The ship creaked around them as the storm intensified, cocooning them in their own private world. Derek found himself studying Kira's face, the delicate curve of her jaw, the slight point to her ears, the way her silver hair caught the dim light. Without her arrogance as a shield, she was beautiful. "You're staring," she observed, but made no move to turn away. "Sorry," he said, not sounding sorry at all. "Just thinking that there's more to you than I initially thought." "And there's more to you than just a military grunt," she countered. "The way you came back for me, not many would have risked themselves for someone who'd been nothing but trouble." Derek shrugged. "Humans are stubborn that way too." Outside, the storm howled like a living thing, but inside, a different kind of tension was building, one that had nothing to do with the weather and everything to do with the narrowing space between them as Kira moved to sit beside him on his bunk. "I think," she said softly, her fingers brushing against his, "that I'm about to pay an entirely different kind of price for ignoring your advice." The temperature inside the ship dropped noticeably as the storm intensified. Derek checked the environmental controls with a frown. "Power's fluctuating. The sand must be clogging the external solar collectors." Kira hugged herself, shivering despite her elevated body temperature. "How serious is it?" "If we can't clear the collectors soon, we'll lose life support within 12 hours, Derek replied, his military training keeping his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. A sudden flicker of the lights punctuated his assessment, followed by the environmental system shutting down with an ominous whine. Make that 2 hours, he corrected, already moving toward the maintenance hatch. I need to reroute power from the auxiliary systems. Kira followed him, her steps more stable now that the antivenin had taken effect. I can help. My father insisted I learn basic ship mechanics, and said a Talani should never be completely dependent on others. Derek raised an eyebrow. First time I've heard you mention your father without sounding resentful. He's complicated, Kira admitted, kneeling beside Derek as he opened the access panel. Ambassador Talani expects perfection from his children. My 3 brothers all followed the traditional path: diplomatic service, arranged marriages to suitable partners, perfect Talani lives. And you, Derek handed her a tool, their fingers brushing momentarily. Kira's breath caught at the contact. I'm the disappointment. Too emotional, too curious about other cultures, too unsuitable. She focused intently on the power coupling in front of her. This trip was supposed to be my last chance to prove myself worthy of the Talani Diplomatic Corps. Derek watched her work with surprising skill. By delivering you to an arranged marriage? Her hands stilled. How did you know? Military intelligence briefing. Your father arranged a political alliance with the Araxis governor's son. Derek's voice remained neutral, but his jaw tightened. Didn't realize you were being forced into it. Not forced, Kira corrected, resuming her work. It's our way. The needs of Talani society outweigh individual desires. She glanced at him. Humans find this concept difficult, I understand. Damn right we do, Derek muttered. Marriage should be about choice, about... He trailed off, suddenly aware of how close they were in the confined space. Another power fluctuation sent the ship into darkness, emergency lights casting everything in a soft red glow. The temperature continued to drop, their breath now visible in small clouds. What about you? Kira asked softly. You carry yourself like someone who's lost something. Derek was silent for a long moment, focusing on reconnecting power conduits. Rigelian conflict. I commanded a special operations unit, 12 of the best soldiers in the Alliance. We were ambushed during a routine patrol. His voice grew distant. I was the only survivor. Kira's hand covered his, stopping his work. I'm sorry. I should have seen the signs, should have protected them better. The admission seemed torn from him. That's why I took this transport assignment. Needed time away from combat decisions. You blame yourself for something beyond your control, Kira observed, just as I blame myself for not being the perfect Talani daughter. Their eyes met in the dim red light, a moment of perfect understanding passing between them. Derek became acutely aware of her proximity, the subtle scent of her skin, the way her silver hair gleamed even in the low light. A violent shudder ran through the ship as a particularly strong gust battered the hull. The temperature plummeted further, and Kira couldn't suppress a shiver, despite her elevated body temperature. We need to conserve body heat, Derek said, his training taking over. The emergency blankets in the crew quarters won't be enough alone. Kira nodded, understanding his implication. In Talani culture, sharing body heat is considered an intimate act, reserved for family or mates. In human culture, it's called survival, Derek replied, though his quickened pulse suggested otherwise. They finished the temporary power reroute and returned to the crew quarters, where Derek pulled out the emergency thermal blankets. The ship's temperature had dropped to near freezing, and even with his military conditioning, Derek felt the cold seeping into his bones. Kira hesitated only briefly before sitting beside him on the narrow bunk. Your human practicality is admirable, she said, a new note in her voice as she pressed against his side. Derek wrapped the thermal blanket around them both, his arm naturally falling around her shoulders. Her skin was hot to the touch, her Talani physiology and the toxin's effects creating a stark contrast to the cold air. You're burning up, he observed with concern. The cycle, she explained, her voice a near whisper. It intensifies with proximity to a compatible mate. The implication hung in the air between them. Derek found himself studying her face. No longer the haughty diplomat's daughter, but a woman caught between worlds, just as he was caught between his past, whatever future awaited. Is that what I am? He asked softly. Compatible? Kira's amber eyes met his, vulnerability and desire mingling in their depths. Biologically, Talani can reproduce with humans. It's rare but not impossible. Culturally, she trailed off. Culturally, I'm beneath your station, Derek finished for her. No, she corrected him firmly. Culturally, you're forbidden because you represent everything Talani are taught to suppress. Passion, spontaneity, choosing one's own path. Her hand came to rest on his chest, feeling his heartbeat. The very qualities I've always secretly admired. The ship creaked around them, the storm's howl a distant backdrop to the tension building in the small space between them. Derek found himself leaning closer, drawn by something more powerful than the cold or the circumstances. If we, he began, his voice rough, your arranged marriage would be impossible, she finished. Talani mate for life, Derek. Once the bond is formed, it cannot be broken or replaced. The weight of her words hung between them. What had begun as a simple transport mission had become something far more complicated, a choice that would alter both their futures irrevocably. I should warn you, Derek said, his hand gently brushing a strand of silver hair from her face. Humans can be stubborn about the people they care about. If we do this, I won't just walk away when we reach the capital. Kira's lips curved into a smile that transformed her entire face. Then perhaps ignoring your advice about the protective suit wasn't entirely a mistake. As their lips finally met, the ship's systems hummed back to life around them, warmth gradually returning to the cabin. But neither of them noticed, lost in a different kind of heat entirely. Morning arrived with startling clarity on Araxis. The storm had passed during the night, leaving behind a transformed landscape, dunes shifted, rock formations exposed, and the ship partially buried in fine red sand. Derek woke first, momentarily disoriented by the weight of Kira curled against him. Silver hair spilled across his chest, her orange-tinted skin warm against his. The events of the previous night rushed back, bringing with them a mixture of contentment and concern. He gently extricated himself, careful not to wake her. The ship's systems had stabilized overnight, but the diagnostic panel showed significant external damage. They'd need to make repairs before attempting to reach the capital. Kira stirred, her amber eyes opening slowly. For a moment, she simply watched him, a vulnerability in her expression he'd never seen before. No regrets, he asked softly. She stretched, cat-like and graceful. Talani don't believe in regrets, only in consequences. Her lips curved into a smile. Though I admit the consequences of ignoring your advice about the protective suit have been unexpected. Derek laughed, the sound rich and genuine. That's one way of putting it. He returned to the diagnostic panel, frowning at the readouts. We've got work to do if we want the ship flying again. The main thrusters are clogged with sand, and the communications array needs realignment. Kira joined him, wrapping the thermal blanket around her shoulders. How long? A day, maybe 2. He glanced at her. Which means we'll reach the capital just in time for your arrangement. The unspoken question hung between them. Kira's expression grew serious. I can't go through with it now, she said quietly. Even if we hadn't. Talani bonding is irreversible, Derek. What happened between us last night formed a connection that can't be undone. Derek felt a weight lift from his shoulders, replaced immediately by a new concern. Your father won't accept that easily. No, she agreed. He won't. They dressed and began repairs, working side by side under the punishing twin suns. Derek was impressed by Kira's technical knowledge and determination. The spoiled diplomat's daughter was revealing hidden depths with each passing hour. By midday, they'd cleared the thrusters and were working on the communications array when Kira suddenly doubled over, a wave of nausea hitting her without warning. Kira! Derek was at her side instantly, supporting her as she swayed. I'm fine, she insisted. Though her orange skin had paled to an alarming amber hue, just the heat. Derek guided her back into the ship, concern etched on his features. Let me scan you. The toxin might be having delayed effects. She didn't resist as he ran the medical scanner over her trembling form. The results made his eyes widen. That's impossible, he muttered, running the scan again. What is it? Kira asked, her voice small. Derek looked up, his expression a mixture of shock and wonder. According to this, you're pregnant. But it's only been hours since we... Kira didn't appear surprised, merely placing a hand on her abdomen. Talani reproductive biology is accelerated compared to humans, especially during a proper cycle, and the toxin may have enhanced the process. She met his gaze steadily. This is why our reproductive cycles are considered sacred. They're remarkably efficient. Derek sat heavily beside her, processing the implications. A baby, our baby. Yes, Kira watched him carefully. In Talani culture, this would cement our bond beyond any question. No one, not even my father, could interfere. And in human culture, Derek said slowly, taking her hand, it means I'm not going anywhere. Relief flooded her features. You're not upset? Surprised, yes. Terrified, definitely. He smiled, squeezing her hand. But upset? No, somehow this feels right. Kira's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I never expected to find this with you, with any human. My people speak of humans as primitive, ruled by emotions rather than logic. Yet your emotional nature is what draws me to you. And your logical nature is what keeps me grounded, Derek replied. Maybe that's the point. We balance each other. They shared a moment of quiet understanding before returning to the practical matters at hand. The pregnancy complicated things. Kira would need proper medical care, and they needed to reach the civilization sooner rather than later. By sunset, they'd completed the essential repairs. The ship wouldn't win any beauty contests, but it would fly. As they prepared for departure, Derek received an incoming transmission, the first since the storm cleared. Commander Frost, barked a familiar voice. This is General Harrington. Report your status immediately. Derek exchanged a glance with Kira before responding. Sir, we experienced technical difficulties and were forced to make an emergency landing. Repairs are complete and will resume course to the capital tomorrow morning. Is the Talani ambassador's daughter unharmed? The general demanded. Derek hesitated, looking at Kira. She nodded encouragingly. Lady Talani is... Well, sir, there were some complications involving local wildlife, but the situation has been resolved. Good. Ambassador Talani has been breathing down our necks. Get her to the capital for this damn ceremony without further incident. That's an order, Commander. Sir, about that, Derek began, but the general cut him off. No excuses, Frost. Complete your mission. Harrington out. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving an uncomfortable silence. Well, Derek said finally, that complicates things. Kira approached him, determination in her stance. No, it simplifies them. We now have a legitimate reason to refuse the arranged marriage. Talani law is clear. The child's welfare supersedes political arrangements. And if your father doesn't see it that way... Her expression hardened. Then we'll make him see it. I've spent my life trying to earn his approval. Perhaps it's time I earned my own instead. Derek pulled her close, marveling at the transformation in the woman who had boarded his ship just days ago. I'm starting to think getting stung by those cacti was the best thing that ever happened to you. Kira laughed, the sound lighter than he'd ever heard from her. I'm paying quite the price for ignoring your advice, Commander Frost. She placed his hand on her abdomen. Though I find I don't mind the cost. As night fell over the desert, they plotted their course to the capital and the confrontation that awaited them there. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The stubborn human commander and the Talani diplomat's daughter, who had found something neither of them had been looking for. The gleaming spires of Araxis' capital rose from the desert like a mirage, a stark contrast to the harsh landscape surrounding it. Derek guided the ship toward the designated landing pad, his jaw set in determination. Remember the plan, he said to Kira, who sat beside him in the co-pilot's seat. We present a united front. We explain the situation calmly and rationally. Kira nodded, though her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her clothing, a more formal outfit she'd found in her luggage, modified to accommodate her still flat stomach. The Talani pregnancy was progressing rapidly. According to the medical scanner, she was already equivalent to several weeks along, despite it being only a day since conception. My father won't be rational about this, she warned. Talani pride themselves on emotional control, but when it comes to family honor, that control can slip. Derek reached over and squeezed her hand. Then we'll be rational enough for everyone. As they approached the landing pad, the communications system crackled to life. Transport vessel Hermes, this is Araxis Control. You are directed to landing pad 7. Security personnel will meet you upon arrival. Derek frowned. Security personnel? That's not standard protocol for a diplomatic transport. My father, Kira said grimly. He suspects something. The ship touched down with a gentle thud. Through the view screen, Derek could see a delegation waiting, a mix of Talani officials in formal robes, Alliance military officers, and a group of elegantly dressed aliens he assumed were the family of Kira's intended husband. At the center stood a tall, imposing Talani male with silver hair streaked with black, his orange skin darker and more weathered than Kira's. Ambassador Talani's expression was carved from stone, his amber eyes cold as they fixed on the ship. Well, Derek said with forced lightness, at least we don't have to track everyone down. Kira's hand tightened around his. Derek, if they separate us, they won't, he assured her, though his military experience told him otherwise. But if they do, remember, I'll find you, no matter what. They shared one last kiss before the hatch opened, exposing them to the scrutiny of the waiting delegation. Derek stepped out first, instinctively positioning himself slightly in front of Kira. He saluted the Alliance officers crisply. Commander Frost reporting mission complete, sirs? General Harrington, a barrel-chested man with a perpetual scowl, returned the salute. Commander, your report mentions complications. Before Derek could respond, Ambassador Talani stepped forward, his gaze fixed on his daughter. Kira, he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority, you are late. The bonding ceremony was scheduled for tomorrow, but now must be delayed for proper preparations. His nostrils flared slightly. You appear unwell. Kira straightened her spine, a new confidence in her bearing that made Derek's chest swell with pride. Father, she acknowledged with a formal bow, there have been developments that make the bonding ceremony impossible. A murmur ran through the assembled group. The ambassador's expression didn't change, but the temperature around him seemed to drop several degrees. Impossible is not a word that Talani recognized, he stated flatly. Whatever developments have occurred can be addressed after you fulfill your duty. Derek stepped forward. Sir, with all due respect. Commander Frost, General Harrington interrupted sharply, you will accompany these officers for debriefing. Now, 2 Alliance security officers moved to flank Derek. He stood his ground, looking to Kira. I'm not leaving her side. Ambassador Talani's eyes narrowed dangerously. This is a family matter, human. Your transport duties are complete. He stays with me, Kira declared, her voice ringing with authority that surprised everyone, including her father. By Talani law, he has that right. The ambassador's composure cracked slightly. What nonsense is this? Kira placed a hand on her abdomen, the gesture unmistakable in its meaning. I carry his child, Father. We are bonded in the most ancient and irreversible way recognized by our laws. The silence that followed was deafening. Ambassador Talani's face cycled through shock, disbelief, and finally cold fury. The family of Kira's intended husband began whispering urgently among themselves. Impossible, the ambassador finally hissed. You cannot have bonded with a human. The medical scans confirm it, Kira replied steadily. The child grows within me. The bond is formed. General Harrington recovered first, his face purpling with rage. Commander Frost, you were ordered to transport the ambassador's daughter, not to fall in love with her, Derek finished, standing tall. With all due respect, sir, that wasn't covered in my mission parameters. Before anyone could respond, Alliance security officers moved swiftly, separating Derek from Kira despite their protests. Derek struggled against their grip. This is against regulations. You can't. Commander Frost is hereby relieved of duty pending investigation into conduct unbecoming an officer, General Harrington announced formally. Take him to headquarters for questioning. Simultaneously, Ambassador Talani gestured to his aides. Escort my daughter to our residence. Our physicians will examine her and determine the truth of these claims. Kira fought against the hands that pulled her away from Derek. No! You can't separate us! The bond will be verified, her father cut her off coldly. And if found valid, addressed accordingly. As they were pulled in opposite directions, Derek caught Kira's desperate gaze. "I'll find you," he called out. "I promise." The last thing he saw before being forced into a military transport was Ambassador Talani leaning close to his daughter, his expression grave as he spoke words Derek couldn't hear. Hours later, Derek sat in a sterile interrogation room at Alliance headquarters, having repeated his story 3 times to increasingly skeptical officers. His commander's insignia had been removed, his status reduced to pending review. "Let me get this straight," Colonel Mercer said, reviewing the notes. "You claim that after Lady Talani was injured by native flora, she experienced a biochemical reaction that led to a reproductive cycle, which then resulted in relations between you, and now she's carrying a human Talani hybrid child?" "That's exactly what happened," Derek confirmed for the 4th time. "And according to Talani law, that makes us bonded for life. The arranged marriage cannot proceed." The colonel sighed heavily. "Commander, Mr. Frost, do you have any idea of the diplomatic incident you've created? The Talani-Araxis alliance has been in negotiation for years." "With all due respect, sir, Kira is not a bargaining chip. She's a person with rights under both alliance and Talani law." A knock at the door interrupted them. A junior officer entered, handing the colonel a datapad. Mercer's eyebrows rose as he read it. "Well," he said finally, looking up at Derek with new respect, "it seems the Talani medical examination has confirmed Lady Kira's pregnancy. Ambassador Talani has requested your immediate release into his custody." Derek's heart leapt. "Is Kira all right?" "According to this, she's refusing all food and medical treatment until she sees you." The colonel's expression softened slightly. "You've certainly made an impression, Frost." As Derek was escorted from headquarters, he wondered what awaited him at the ambassador's residence. Would Kira's father accept their bond, or was this summons the prelude to something more sinister? Either way, he was one step closer to reuniting with Kira, and he had no intention of being separated from her again. The ambassador's residence loomed before Derek, its architecture an elegant blend of Talani curves and Araxian angles. Alliance security escorted him to the entrance, where Talani guards with impassive faces took custody of him without a word. Derek was led through corridors adorned with artifacts from a dozen worlds until they reached a grand chamber. Ambassador Talani sat at the head of a long table, flanked by Talani elders on one side and the family of Kira's intended husband on the other. Kira herself stood by a window, her face lighting up when she saw Derek. "Derek!" She moved toward him, but her father's sharp command froze her in place. "Remain where you are, daughter. This matter is not yet resolved." Derek straightened his shoulders, meeting the ambassador's cold gaze. "With respect, sir, according to Talani law, it is resolved. Kira carries my child. We are bonded." "So the medical scans confirm," the ambassador conceded reluctantly. "However, there are complications." A distinguished Talani male rose from beside Kira's intended husband, an older version of the young man who glared at Derek with undisguised contempt. "I am Prefect Valen," he announced. "My son's marriage to Ambassador Talani's daughter has been arranged for 7 cycles. Contracts were signed, alliances formed. Your interference has cost my family greatly." "I understand your position," Derek replied diplomatically, "but surely no contract supersedes Talani bonding law." The ambassador's expression tightened. "The human is correct about our laws," he admitted reluctantly. "However, there is the matter of compensation." "Name your price," Derek said without hesitation. The room fell silent. Even Kira looked surprised at his directness. Ambassador Talani leaned forward. "You would pay reparations? For Kira and our child? Anything?" The ambassador exchanged glances with Prefect Valen, then addressed Derek. "Human currency is worthless in this matter. The price must be paid in Talani tradition." "Name it," Derek repeated. "The right of valor," the ambassador declared. "An ancient trial to prove a mate's worthiness. Few Talani attempt it. No off-worlder ever has." Kira gasped. "Father, no!" "The right is dangerous even for those raised in our traditions." "It is his right to attempt it," the ambassador countered. "If he succeeds, the bond will be recognized, and Prefect Valen's family compensated from my own holdings. If he fails, he left the consequence unspoken. Derek looked to Kira, who shook her head minutely, fear evident in her eyes. But he had faced worse odds in the Rigelian conflict. I accept, he stated firmly. The ambassador nodded, seemingly unsurprised. The rite begins at dawn. As the meeting adjourned, Prefect Valen approached Derek, his son trailing behind. Human, he said, his tone neutral but not hostile. Your willingness to undergo the rite is unexpected. My people have long believed humans lack the discipline for our ways. We're full of surprises, Derek replied evenly. The prefect studied him. Indeed, perhaps that is why my son's intended chose you. He glanced at his scowling offspring. A lesson in humility for us both, I think. After they departed, Derek was finally permitted to approach Kira. She flew into his arms, her body trembling. You fool, she whispered against his chest. The rite has killed Talani warriors in their prime. Then I'll be the first human to succeed, he assured her, stroking her silver hair. What exactly does this rite entail? Kira pulled back, her expression grave. 3 trials, mind, body, and spirit. But there's something else you should know. She placed his hand on her abdomen, which now showed a slight swell. Our child is special. Special how? Ambassador Talani answered, approaching silently. Human Talani offspring are exceedingly rare, Commander Frost. The few recorded cases in our history produce children with unique abilities, enhanced intuition, accelerated healing, mental capabilities beyond either parent species. Derek processed this information. Is that why you're allowing me to attempt the rite instead of just having me removed? The ambassador's expression remained impassive, but something shifted in his eyes. Partially, but also because my daughter has never defied me so completely before. Such determination is a trait I had not believed she possessed. She's stronger than you know, Derek said. Perhaps the ambassador studied him. Or perhaps you bring out qualities in her that I failed to nurture. He straightened. Rest now. Tomorrow will test you beyond anything your military training has prepared you for. Dawn broke over Araxis with brutal clarity. Derek stood in traditional Talani ceremonial attire, lightweight fabric that offered little protection, at the edge of an ancient arena carved into the desert rock. Kira approached, her own formal robes flowing around her. The first trial tests the mind, she explained hurriedly. You'll face illusions designed to break your concentration. Remember, no matter what you see, it isn't real. I've faced combat hallucinations before, Derek assured her. Not like these, she warned, squeezing his hand before joining her father in the observer's gallery. The trial began without fanfare. One moment Derek stood alone in the arena, the next, he was surrounded by swirling mist that solidified into his worst memories. The ambush that killed his squad, each death playing out in excruciating detail. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself to move forward through the apparitions. New illusions formed. Kira rejecting him, their child dying, futures too painful to contemplate. Each step became harder, the visions more convincing. Then he remembered Kira's words from their night together. Humans feel everything we've taught ourselves to suppress. His emotions weren't weakness, they were strength. Instead of fighting the illusions, he acknowledged them, accepted the pain they represented, and kept moving. When he reached the center of the arena, the mist dissipated. First trial complete, announced an elder. The physical trial followed immediately, a combat challenge against 3 Talani warriors. Derek's military training served him well, but Talani were naturally stronger. He took punishing blows, adapting his strategy to use their strength against them. When the last opponent fell, Derek remained standing, bloodied but unbowed. The final trial, Spirit, proved the most difficult. Derek was led to a chamber containing a single pedestal with a glowing orb. Place your hands upon it, instructed the elder. It will judge your deepest intentions. As Derek touched the orb, his consciousness expanded. He felt Kira's presence, their unborn child's nascent mind, and something else, a profound connection to something greater than himself. The orb pulsed with light, then settled into a steady glow. It is done, the elder announced, surprise evident in his voice. Outside, the assembled Talani and Araxians waited in silence. When Derek emerged, Bruised but standing tall, a murmur ran through the crowd. Ambassador Talani stepped forward. "The human has completed the rite of valor," he declared formally. "The bond between Commander Derek Frost and my daughter Kira Talani is recognized under ancient law." Prefect Valen nodded in acknowledgement, his son sullen but resigned beside him. Kira broke protocol, rushing to Derek and embracing him fiercely. "You impossible, stubborn human," she whispered. "I've never been so proud to be wrong about someone." Derek laughed, wincing at the pain in his ribs. "I did warn you about those cacti." Later, in the privacy of their assigned quarters, Kira tended his wounds with gentle hands. "My father has arranged for your reinstatement in the Alliance military," she told him. "With a promotion, no less. It seems you've impressed more than just me." "And us?" Derek asked, catching her hand. "What happens now?" Kira smiled, guiding his palm to her growing abdomen. "Now we create our own path. Talani tradition and human adaptability. Our child will have the best of both worlds." "I still can't believe all this started because you were too stubborn to wear a protective suit," Derek marveled. "Perhaps the universe knew what it was doing," Kira replied thoughtfully. "Sometimes the most painful lessons lead to the greatest joys." Derek pulled her close, marveling at how a simple transport mission had transformed into the beginning of a new life, one he'd never imagined but now couldn't live without. "So," he murmured against her silver hair, "was ignoring my advice worth the price you paid?" Kira's amber eyes met his, filled with love and mischief. "Absolutely," she declared, sealing her answer with a kiss that promised a lifetime of adventure together.